dependent variable, which is this report average, which is corrected by percent. And I have as a predictor just world rank. I do have significant relationship, but the variance explained is 0.4%. So R square is, yeah.
One quick thing. So I just realized I didn't start recording the meeting up until a few minutes ago. So just to summarize what Ernesto said, and maybe to make sure that I understood correctly. So you tested the relationships between the university, let's call it prestige, and all kinds of outcomes. You looked at the team level and at the individual level. At the team level, we looked at the report quality primarily. At the individual level, we looked at all kinds of peer evaluations, different dimensions of peer evaluations. And the short story is that, yes, university prestige matters. The better the school, usually the higher the evaluations, both of the individual students, but also of the work that the team does. So the team's average university rank does predict the team's performance. And so those students tend to do more work. As a percentage of total work done by the students, the work is of better quality, and they're rated higher by their peers on just about every dimension. There are some little exceptions, and the variance explained is not very high. In fact, in some cases, it's as low as about 2%, 2 point something. But then in some other cases, it's actually much higher as well. So it depends on the dimension, right?
Yes.
So that's for those who will be watching, so if they missed those first 5-10 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, and now back to the regression analysis. So if I run linear regression, and it kind of correlates with our null hypothesis that the better university is, that the better report they should produce. But when we go for just simple linear regression, there is significant relationship, and the way it should be is negative. That actually means that the better university is, the better the report is. But my problem here is that the variance explained is 0.4%. So it, in my opinion, it's just nothing. So you pay 10% more to get 0.5% better result. But this is individual level. Then I did some multiple regressions with this report corrected average variable and world rankings, but I also inserted peer evaluations. But as soon as we get some peer evaluations, and finally I got rid of multicollinearity, so at least it's okay. In this case, ranking does not matter, so it's insignificant, and technical skills are insignificant. But effort, leadership, English, and work ethics actually matter.
Yes, and what's more, report calculated average corrected. It is built in a way that does not convince me at all, actually, because it is,
I thrown this out. Actually, I don't. It was my fault that I named it really convincing. But actually, the measurement that should be used is report average percentage, which is corrected by percentage.
Yes.
But with the percentage, I ran into a problem also, because when I summarized, I didn't do it for all the teams because I was doing it manually. But when I was doing the summarization, actually, none of the teams got 100%. So if you summarize all the percentages given to each person, you either end up with 90% something or with 100% something. So it's not also, but it's not significantly biased, this variable. So I think we can rely on it more or less, because the teams are measuring each member in the same way. So it should be okay, but still the story as I see it, yes, ranking matters. When it correlates, but then we can kind of post a question, is it a self-fulfilling prophecy? So the team members believe that these guys do better, and in order, like it happened in sports, if you're running against someone who's really good, you're trying your best, and so actually the ranking is pushing the team level up. But if we try to see if ranking matters in terms of individual performance, yes, we see that almost not. But if you have someone on a team with a higher ranking, everyone else will start performing better. So can this be the story? Because it kind of fits what we have in the data analysis.
We may have to go back to the story. One of the beautiful things about this study is that whatever the findings are, they are interesting and important. So for example, if we find that, let's say, the university prestige or rank matters and people from better schools do better, it's an interesting story. It's kind of what everybody expected anyway, but at least it's a documented proof, and then we show by how much, so that's good, that's publishable. At the same time, if the story was that people from better schools do not perform better, so everything is insignificant, again, it's a very interesting story because you spend all that money on investing in either education that is more expensive or hiring employees that come from more expensive schools, and there is no difference. So that would have been also an interesting story. Or even if the effect was negative, well, in our case, mathematically positive, but negative in the sense that people from better schools don't do so well, then it would be even bigger news because everybody expected otherwise. The worst parts worst scenario for us would be that it's all very mixed. Like it sometimes matters, sometimes doesn't. So we can't say anything definitively. In that case, it's not an interesting story because it doesn't tell anything. Or something that, like what we kind of see where it matters, but the effect is very, very weak. And so we cannot say that it doesn't matter because there is a statistically significant effect. But at the same time, we cannot say that it matters because the effect is very weak. And so in that case, it's also kind of not a very compelling story. But at the same time, from what I hear, even based on the simple correlations, we do have sometimes relatively, respectable effects. I don't want to call them strong, but they are substantially bigger than zero, and then some may be relatively low. And I think the way around here would be to try to tell more than just say if it matters or not. So we spoke about some of the possible explanations. So one would be obviously look at the different dimensions, and we already did that, so it may not be as clean as I was hoping for, but one of the things I was hoping for would be that it matters. The effect may be weak, but it's not exactly the same depending on the dimension. And then we may, for example, see that, yes, people from better schools do better, but primarily on, and let's, for example, if we looked at the peer evaluations, and I'm speculating here, I didn't see the exact numbers, but for example, if we saw something like, yes, they actually get relatively higher evaluations on, let's say, intellectual contribution, or maybe percentage of work done, or maybe leadership, but at the same time maybe get somewhat lower correlations at I don't know, friendliness, or maybe whatever other maybe soft versus kind of hard dimensions, or the other way around. I don't know what it might be. Likewise, when we look at the team level versus individual level, the team level is a little tricky here because we are talking about the average team rank. So in a sense, it's all mixed, and so here we should be talking about whether or not presence of people from prestigious schools or maybe the overall kind of rank helps the team overall. And I would expect that the effect here would be probably somewhat weaker than the effect at the individual level, because we kind of mix many things together and then trying to see if they matter. And so there may be some sort of kind of cancel out effects. So that could be, but in any case, what I mean is that one of the possible interesting twists could be that we say that it matters kind of not so much, but still matters at a statistically significant level, but it matters more here and it matters less here. And maybe even in one of the dimensions, we'll find some sort of a negative correlation, may even say then, yes, it helps everywhere, but in this particular respect, it may even hurt. In that case, it would be a little bit more interesting story. In terms of some of the outcomes that we didn't consider, so we talked about peer evaluations, multiple dimensions, and we talked about the quality of the reports. But we may also want to take a look at, and maybe you did take a look, maybe I missed it, but for example, something like satisfaction with, I don't know, the team, or maybe identification with the team. We have those dimensions. So things that are not exactly performance, but they're still indicators of, let's call it team effectiveness. So maybe people from, more prestigious schools, I don't know, either identify more or maybe kind of keep a distance and don't identify more with the team. Maybe they have less, I don't know, organizational commitment, or in our case, team commitment. Then also another, and again, I'm kind of throwing everything that I wrote down while you were listing the results, but another dimension that we might want to look at, and I'm not sure if anything is coming out of this, self-promotion. So, when we measure peer evaluations, we have self-evaluations and we have peer evaluations. So what I give myself versus what my team gives me. And so there is obviously a difference there. So people always evaluate themselves higher than the team evaluates them. And I wonder if we want to take a look at how those self-evaluations correlate with university prestige. Are people from better schools are more self-promoting, or maybe they're more self-effacing or more modest? And so here we can look at the absolute level of the peer, of the self-evaluations, or the gap between the peer evaluations and the self-evaluations. So presumably your actual level is the peer evaluations, and then how much more would you give yourself? Just to see if people maybe, you know, from better schools, maybe they're more prone to, I don't know, brag and see their contribution is even higher than, you know, compared to whatever the peers see. Or maybe the other way around, maybe they will be a little bit more, modest here. So what I'm trying to say here is that if we simply say that it kind of matters, but not really, and yes, you know, there is an effect, but I wouldn't spend my money on it, then it's, you know, it's interesting, but it's probably not as compelling as, you know, if we showed some additional things. And as I said, some of those outcome dimensions could be one interesting, you know, additional story. Another interesting additional story could be then why, the mechanism. So again, I think you looked at it, I think I saw it somewhere before, but so why do they perform better? So let's say we do see some effect. So is it because they're more prepared? Like, for example, they do better on the readiness test, or maybe get higher evaluations on language proficiency or technical skills? Or is it because, I don't know, they just put in more hours? So we have dimensions there in the data set, I mean, variables in the data set where we literally ask them how many hours did you work, how many messages did you send, those kinds of things. In fact, even in peer evaluations, we have the frequency of communication. And so in that case, we can either use them as just pure correlations, or maybe some sort of like a mediated model where we see that university rank leads to, you know, like, for example, higher technical skills, which in turn leads to better quality reports, something like that. So in that case, we can show that, yes, it does matter. Maybe it's not strong, but here is why. Maybe even we can say that, you know, people who have those higher skills, maybe that mediation effect will completely negate the direct effect. And maybe in that case, the story will be that, yes, they do better. And yes, they kind of do better because they have better technical skills. But if you have people with better technical skills, you don't need the rank. So just go for the people with the better technical skills, because once we add that mediator, the direct effect becomes zero. I don't know if it will be the case, but it could be that, you know, they're not really better. They just, you know, have better skills. And if you find someone from a lower school who has that same level of skills, they will do equally well. So that's potentially another kind of additional explanation. And then obviously, so at this time we looked at correlations only, and I don't think it will change once we do the multiple regression. As one of my advisors used to say that, you know, if you really have an effect, you can detect it with correlations and mean differences, and you don't need to do anything fancy schmancy. But I think we still want to do some sort of, you know, regression, and then probably we'll want to control for things like maybe age, maybe gender, maybe prior international experience, maybe even things like, I don't know, as I said, technical skills, cultural intelligence, to see if after controlling for all of that, there will be still effect of the rank. And what probably will happen is that whatever weak effect we had, it will become zero. And then we can say that, you know what, maybe university rank doesn't matter that much, because once you control for those actual other things that you want to measure, rank becomes insignificant. So if you don't have the time to test for, you know, all those other predictors, then yes, go for the people from the best school. But if you can test there, as I said, technical skills, cultural intelligence, maybe look at the prior experience, then rank itself will not tell you much. Just, you know, just test for those. And finally, my last comment before I shut up, I really liked what Anna said. I'm not sure if she was planning to do this as a test, but I think if we add it as a test, it would be a very, very interesting illustration. Anna said that, do you want to pay 10% more to get a 5% improvement in performance, or 0.5% improvement in performance? If we, or once we have the actual effect, maybe we should get some sort of like, you know, plug in the actual numbers in the regression and say, like, for example, you know, university rank number 1,000, the annual tuition is, let's add in $1,000. And the university rank 100, annual tuition is $50,000 or $40,000. So you have like a 40 time increase in the cost, or you know, this much in dollars. But then the predicted performance level, given our regression coefficients will be, let's say, I don't know, extra 3% or extra 5%, whatever that is. And then the question becomes, are you willing to spend that much money to improve the performance, but this much? And so if we had, like, hypothetical few examples with the real numbers, real dollar values and the real percent improvement in performance, I think this will be more illustrative as opposed to just saying that, variance explained is 2.9%. So I'm not sure if we want to add that maybe in the discussion somewhere at the end, just, to kind of give some hard meaning to the numbers that we've reported in the tables. So, but overall, as I believe these are very good results. I mean, there is something to work with, and the most important thing, the most thing that makes me feel best is that it's consistent. I was very worried that it would be, like a little here but nothing there. Then it's really mixed. Here, at least, it's weak, but it's consistent, robust across all dimensions. So we have a consistent story. Whatever it is, it's still a story. So, but anyway, that's my take based on the report of the results.
May add just something. I put something here in the chat also for people that are joining now. In my view, this is actually the stronger result that we have here, because in a way I am skeptical when we use, for example, the percentage, because this is based on what the student says, so we don't really know if it's anything true. On the opposite, this relation here is actually on objective data, because report overall rating is the average of evaluation by instructors, and ranking calculated average is the average ranking in the team. So this is, we do not have any assessment by student here, and actually here we have a variance explained that is 3%. It seems very low, but actually I would not expect something high here, because if we look at the ranking, the Webometrics ranking, and we, for example, pay attention to some examples that are in our mind, for example, looking at some university and where they are, that ranking actually gives an idea, a general idea about the quality of universities, but it is not as explicative as you might expect. If you look, for example, the position of the London School of Economics, this was pretty low on that ranking. I can see some very respected universities that are pretty low in respect to others. So yes, it gives an idea. So I would not expect the variance explained that was, I don't know, 10% or something. So I think our data now, so thanks Justin and Vas, our data now seems pretty reliable, because everything is going, whatever you do, in the direction that you would expect. Not with strong numbers, but everything goes where it should go. One path that we might follow, but I don't know if it's a good idea, because it would be very time-consuming. So this relation, report overall ranking and ranking calculated average, is at the team level. So I wonder if we want to calculate peer evaluation at the team level, and then try to make a multiple regression that is entirely at the team level. But from your comments, I understand that maybe we are skeptical about the average in the team, because maybe we are more interested in some outliers, some very good students from high-ranked universities. So maybe the average in the team is not what we are actually looking for. So if we think that this is the direction, we might make an effort in order to calculate all the peer evaluation as an average in the team. That is something that we have not been doing yet.
Well, if I may respond to that, one, I completely agree with Ernesto that the effect size is actually, it may look small in terms of the absolute value, but it's not really that small compared to what we see in other studies. There was this one interesting meta-analysis about 10 years ago, and they specifically wanted to see what the average size, effect size is in social studies or social sciences. And so they took, I believe it was like 1 million publications or 1 million effect sizes in management, psychology, like some of these disciplines around our discipline. So I think it was management, psychology, and education, something like that. So basically social sciences and economics, if I remember correctly. And so they literally took an average of all of those reported effects in the studies, and the average correlation was 0.18. So if you do it as variance explained, 0.18 to squared, it's 3.2% variance explained. And so that's across all the published social science studies. So what we see here is, not much, like for some dimensions it's a little lower, for some it's a little higher. So it's very comparable to what's been in, it's not natural science, it's not physics where the effect sizes may be higher. So what we see here is, pretty normal. And to Ernesto's comment, individual versus team level, I think both are viable, and we definitely want to include both. My only concern with the team level, it's not even that we mix, like most teams will have some students from highly ranked schools and some students from lower ranked schools. And I don't have a problem with that. And I don't have a problem with talking about the overall kind of average, rank of the team in terms of their university rankings. My only worry there was that once we mix those high and low, we may end up with insignificant effects just because of that mixing. So there will be basically cancels out because of the random variance, because the teams were formed randomly. And so if we still find some effect, that's very nice, and we probably want to report it. My worry is that if we find no effect at the team level, then the reviewers will say, well, of course you will find no effect because you have mixed random mix. And so most teams will kind of be around average anyway, because some will have higher people from better schools, and some won't. But the good thing is that we are still finding the effect. So I think it's definitely something that we want to report, even though it's due to that mixing, we probably lose some of the objective effect there.
Plus, regarding the team and the individual level, at the same time, we actually now are seeing the more effect on team level than we see on individual level. So on team level, variance explained is 2.9, and on the individual level, it's 0.4. Mm-hmm. So it's like how many? 7 times higher.
Yeah.
So,
that's why I was maybe expecting something. If we calculate the average peer evaluation in the team, maybe something good is coming out, I expect, but it is...
level, should we look, and probably, given the better results, maybe that's what we want to stick with, but it seems to me with the team, we can be talking about so-called, average team rank, for example, or average team, pedigree. But, when we explain that, so should it be then the story that, get as many good people as possible? Or maybe we should look also at the maximum and then say, talk about presence of an elite student, for example. I don't know if that's a good word, but so maybe we should, when we do the team analysis, just for the sake of interest, to look not only at the average, but also maybe at the maximum, maybe at the minimum, maybe even in some sort of standard deviation or range. Because I will not be surprised if it's not the average, but the actual presence of this, star of the team that changes everything. Did you check for that before? Did you, or you didn't?
No, we have not been doing that actually.
What I mean is that maybe in the story, like when we give the advice to the managers, maybe we should check both. It could be either, try to get people from the best schools you can so that your overall pedigree is high. But at the same time, I will not be surprised, as I said, if we look at the highest one, for example, and then maybe the story is that it doesn't matter how good the team overall is. Once you have somebody who's really, really strong, he will kind of build the team around, himself or herself, and maybe will be that locomotive that will propel the team to the, to the new heights. Or maybe, that individual who does most of the work and everybody else is just dragging along, or not. I don't know, but maybe something, to look at. So.
There is one concern that I'm not sure, and that's the question I wanted to ask you. When I ran some automated linear regressions also with a bunch of different factors just to figure out if the rank matters or it doesn't. But the interesting thing is when there is a distribution picture of the university ranks, it actually doesn't look like Gauss one. It's
power distribution.
How do you say it? Left-sided.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's left-sided. Yeah. Sometimes you see actually when you talk about these kinds of things, usually the distribution is what they call the power distribution. So
yes, and it is, and it's probably because of your university VAS, because it's overrepresented and it's relatively high.
Yeah, I actually just literally a week ago finally read the book called The Black Swan. Everybody knows.
Oh yeah.
But I've read books by that author before, but not this particular one. And so there he makes a compelling case that many phenomena in life are not normally distributed. And so he specifically talks about the rankings. He talks about income. He talks about performance. So in those cases, it's not a normal distribution. It's, a small 1% has, like half of the money in the world. Or for example, people from the most prestigious schools make like 5 times or 10 times as much as the average. So all of those are kind of power distributions, like with a very high, you know what that looks like. It's like the mushroom distribution, they also call it sometimes, like mushrooms flipped on the side. And so I don't know, it could be the case in our case, which again, something that we may even, I don't know, plot and show if it turns out to be interesting. Alex and Justin joined in, and Mariana I see is here. I'm sorry, guys, we've been talking all the time.
It's okay. No, we're listening.
No problem.
Get my power charger.
No, my concern actually is because the distribution is not the Gaussian one, and we use Pearson correlations to evaluate something. Can we actually do this?
You mean that mathematically regression and correlation assumes normal distribution?
Yes, exactly, and we see that it is not there.
Yeah, we may have to do some sort of normality check, which, obviously we have the tests, because otherwise, presumably, again, we violate the assumptions. And in that case, we may have to do, there are some kinds of, I'm not very familiar with that, but there are nonparametric tests, as they call them. Tests that still, give you the relationship, even if the distribution is not, parametric or not normal. Justin probably knows more about that because he's also methodologically kind of stronger than I am, I know. So,
yeah, and I'm not sure SPSS does this. So Justin, yeah, can you say something here?
Well, I can't speak to the distribution part right now, but my biggest concern looking at the results were, I guess I'm struggling with this with another project from XCulture data too. How to correctly account for the dual nesting structures, right? Because right now, the most sophisticated analysis I've seen is OLS, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not sure that does correctly account for the two structures.
You're right. So you mean that we look separately at one level versus the other, but we don't really look at them. And, yeah.
Right. And if I was a reviewer, that's the first thing I would see. And I would push it back and I would say, you guys figure this out before you move ahead. So I'm concerned because I actually don't know. I can take care, like methodologically, I know how to take care of one nesting structure, but we have two. And that's beyond my understanding.
You mean that it's teams with individuals within teams, but
also individuals within structures and within universities. So we have both, and I don't know how to deal with it.
I kind of like, I'm not sure if, again, it's a problem, but it seems to me that simply keeping the two levels separate and, talking separately about individual performance and team performance. Here, the biggest challenge here, Justin, to me is not even that we have two different nestings here, but also our dependent variable, the outcome, is also at two different levels. And so with, like, for example, let's say if we wanted to use HLM, with HLM, the outcome has to be at the individual level.
Well, and, Vas, speak of it, I think, correctly. It has to be lower level, but it doesn't have to be individual, right?
But what I mean is here we have, it's even more complicated because we want to know both performance at the individual and at the team levels. And so I don't know, I mean, it also beyond me, I wouldn't know how to do it in some sort of multi-level modeling scenario. But maybe it's sufficient just to analyze them separately, one at the team level and one at the individual level. Perhaps when we do the individual level, maybe use HLM and then kind of control for like team size or, something at the, but then, I don't know, I mean, this is tricky.
It's extremely tricky. I don't know how to tackle it.
Yeah, maybe we should post a question. So, yeah. But in any case, so let me very quickly one more time just to refresh in my mind to summarize what we've talked about so far. So based on the results we have, mainly looking at the correlations, the very simple stuff, it does look like people from better schools perform better, but only to a small degree. So the correlations are statistically significant, but relatively low. And so, but they are consistent, so they perform somewhat better on just about every dimension you look at. The effect may be a little stronger for some dimensions and a little weaker for others, but overall it is there, and it's kind of very modest but significant. And so we've been trying to think how we can, should we stop there or should we do more? And then obviously one thing Anna is already working on, trying to test the same effects using the multivariate regression, primarily to control for things like, for example, okay, so does it matter when we control for technical skills or age or prior international experience or level of studies, MBA versus undergraduates, or male, female, or whatever else we might want to control for. Maybe even, I don't know, I'm not sure if we want to control for like class size and other things that maybe, against, presumably in larger classes, students get a little less attention from the professors. Not sure if we want to go all the way there. And then I was saying that maybe we should still take a closer look at the individual dimensions, and we'll say that, yes, it does matter, and it matters, not so much, but let's look at individual dimensions, and you see people from better schools do better on this particular performance dimension, but maybe not necessarily as well or as much more on this one. And then also one thing I was trying to say that maybe we should also include other effectiveness measures. So not only the actual performance as in quality of the report or peer evaluations, but also kind of maybe even software outcomes, satisfaction with the project overall, team commitment, team identification, those kinds of things that still are important for the organization, but are not really the product that the team makes. Maybe even, as I was saying, look at things like, for example, self-promotion. So do people from better schools give themselves comparatively higher grades than people from other schools? Or maybe they're more modest and more, And then also maybe we want to look at the mechanism or the reasons. So, and I think Ernesto already reported at some point, so that no, they don't do better on the readiness test, and no, not necessarily have higher cultural intelligence and technical skills. Or maybe I hear that from a different study, because I think
actually no. I think with the data we have right now, people at the individual level from better school with higher ranking have better peer evaluation results along all the dimensions and in a significant
but the readiness test. So the kind of the intellectual capabilities, cultural intelligence.
Maybe I do not have now under my file right now that specific one.
Oh, sorry, we didn't test it. So that's from the bicultural study. So we have a study.
But regarding peer evaluation, they seem to do better along all the dimensions.
Yeah. But what I mean is that we might want to look at, are they better, to start with, not the performance, but do they have better? And so in that case, we might want to take a look at some sort of, preliminary manipulation checks in a sense, trying to see if people from better schools are indeed, higher skilled, before we even look at whether that translates into better performance. And again, if we find that, yes, they are, performing better on the readiness test, yes, they are rated higher for language skills, technical skills, cultural intelligence, then we can say, well, university rank can be a proxy for those things. In fact, even if we do the mediation test and the rank becomes insignificant, we can say, well, maybe it's not exactly the university prestige that makes them better, but it's that selection that the university does. So they select people with better skills, and then it's the training that they do. So people do have higher technical skills. So it's nothing mystic about the school prestige. It's about what the school selects and how the school teaches. Or on the other hand, if the rank still remains significant, because you remember we had the hypothesis as to why people from better schools should perform better. And we had three main hypotheses. One, selection. So they are, the university doesn't do a better job, but they just select better people. Two, training. So presumably they teach them better. So in that case, we'll see better ratings on like technical skills. And three, they live in an environment where they see a lot of achievers, high achievers. And so they get inspired, and as a result, they work more. And so again, to test those hypotheses, we would have to look at some sort of mediations, I guess.
For example, I have been calculating this correlation while we are speaking about readiness test and ranking. And here again, this is how you would expect. So there is a significant negative correlation, and the variance explained is pretty high, as we would expect even more. It is 11%.
So they are better.
They are better.
What I mean is that, and interesting that we didn't think about that before, but we do have specific hypotheses, and to test them, we will have to go beyond the correlations, because we do explain three possible mechanisms in the paper, in the early version of the paper, as to why we should expect people from better schools to perform better. And as I said, there were three things that we discussed. One, We don't know what exactly that is, but we believe those people are better people, in terms of selected better people. So maybe they're not necessarily something, smarter that we can see, or maybe work harder, but they are, selected, from a large pool, and those are pre-selected, skilled people, and that's why they do better once you put them in the teams. So it's not the university's kind of, training, but the selection. Second, obviously, the training, and then third, as I said, the inspiration. So the expectancy theory, they see a lot of people who are successful, and as a result, they believe that they can be successful too. And as a result, they work harder, try harder, more, and they perform better. So for each of those hypotheses, it seems to me we have to have some sort of a regression, probably with a mediation effect. So for example, if we believe that they're better trained by the school, then we will probably see some sort of, effect of, the actual skills. And so as Ernesto just now said, they do score higher on, for example, readiness test or technical skills, which would be a proxy for training. And if so, that's why they perform better. But then if we believe that it's, the inspiration and the expectancy, then maybe we will look at, percentage of work done. Maybe, they work harder, they just work more. Or, number of messages sent, or number of hours spent. We have all those measures, just to see if they actually put in more. And if we do see that, we can say, well, again, maybe it's not the university that makes them better, just because the university inspires them. And so kind of they have better work ethics because of, that expectancy. So something like that. And in that case, I suppose, again, it would be a more kind of explained story rather than just saying, better schools do better. So all easily testable, but we may want to, kind of make that extra step so that it's directly tied to the hypothesis.
Okay.
Alex, Mariana, you guys have been very quiet.
Silent.
Well, I'm not quite sure how well my connection is working here. I don't have any picture, if I see that correctly.
Let's do the following. Would it be a good idea okay, so it seems like, we looked at the results, we discussed possible, ways forward. Would it be a good idea to stop now? And maybe, so I've been taking notes here of what we've been talking, and maybe if I send out like a summary of what we've discussed to everyone, and then either ask for additional input, or one thing that I would like to maybe do, and then maybe you can refine it further, literally maybe try to create the final list of tests and the results that we would like to report. So obviously we would like to keep the correlation. Obviously we want to do multiple regressions with the controls for control purposes. And then maybe, as I said, some sort of mediation tests that will tie the results closer to the hypothesis. And then maybe, again, we jotted down a few other potential either outcome variables, or maybe a few other potential relationships that we might want to test, like, as I said, satisfaction, self-promotion. I don't know if anything will come out of this, but maybe we just want to take a look just to see. So if nothing interesting there, we can just drop them. But if there is something interesting, it may be worthwhile including. And then everybody will also take a look at this kind of proposed structure of the results section, and then add maybe something more, or maybe suggest that we drop some things. And then again, we will do the results one more time, and basically we'll have a clean set of numbers, and then, develop the paper or revise the paper, especially the introduction and the theory parts and the discussion around this new set of results, which will probably stay as it was, just maybe with some additional twists. So would that be a good way forward, or do we want to discuss some more? Do we have any other things?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Justin, raised this question of multi-level stuff. I don't know, maybe we should send an email. I can do that to the research methods division and just see if any of those, smart methods people can suggest something.
That would be a good idea. If you have someone that has specific competencies on this, maybe we can have some
just to
input
see what
about
they say. If nothing, that's fine, but maybe there will be some interesting idea. Anything else before we stop? So it's been almost an hour.
No, it sounds good actually to come up finally with a list of variables, what we want to test, because at least myself, I feel like I'm trying to find something and all the results seem to be all the same, explaining Just
Yes, I am
very,
in the
very
same
low
situation.
percentage.
Yes.
Which is good, which is good. I mean, it would be worse, would have been worse if, you know, every time you change a little something, you get a different story. Here, the good thing is that we have very consistent results. So, you know,
Yes.
it may not be the most, you know, revolutionary story, maybe not the one that, you know, that everybody will say, oh, I didn't think so. But at the same time, you know, it's at least a consistent story. And, you know, if the result will be, yeah, we kind of knew that, but now we know it for sure. So I suppose that's also fine.
And I was also told there was the study that checked the connection between university ranking and the salary that the guys earned. I haven't seen that one, but maybe we can try to find it and see if because they have found that there is no significant relationship between the salary and the school rank.
Sure.
So this might be kind of something that we want to add. I think it's a recent one.
Yeah.
I just was told about it. I have never seen it.
That one may be tricky in the sense that many university rankings actually have salary as one of the rankings component. They may not have the absolute salary. They may have like a change from before to after. I mean, obviously, Webometrics and those, they don't do this. But, you know, like when you look at the Bloomberg's Business Week ranking, I know that the salary is one of the rankings, like basically that's one of the dimensions of the ranking. And so in that case, obviously, there will be a positive relationship just because, you know, that's, you know, kind of test the effect of itself on itself. So, but then if I'm sure they controlled it for some, you know, for that somehow, or maybe it was salary like 5 years later, not 6 months later. So it would be, but I'm not sure if we have those numbers for our students. Obviously, we can only speculate. But so maybe something for the review. But or go to the students who graduated 4 years ago, like sculpture, ask how much they make now, and then see. But I don't know. So. The main point that we are trying to make is that we have a real job performance kind of test. So we want to see if they do better on this standardized, you know, on the job, you know, test, in a sense. So I suppose it's okay if we.
Yes.
All right. So anything else? Okay. Well then, Happy New Year. So I will try to write on the summary while it's still fresh in my head right away. So I'll probably send you something within an hour or so. And then, you know, if you want to add something to that, and once we've decided on what needs to be done, maybe we'll ask Ernesto, Anna, Justin, whoever else works on the data, to maybe, you know, if you already have those results, then just put them in a clean form. And if there's something that still needs to be done, maybe quickly do those as well. And I guess once we have the results tables that we all agree on, we can start revising the paper accordingly.
Okay.
All right? Well, very good seeing you all. Okay, well then,
Thank you.
maybe we'll talk again, you know, once we have the next round. Maybe we'll talk again in a few weeks. But hopefully we will have it finally submitted to a journal sometime within the next few weeks.
Okay.